So we've got a couple big topics to discuss here. Looks like PlayStation could be forming a brand new team with the Deviation members that have left Deviation Games. We're also going to be talking about CD Projekt Red, some comments about the next Witcher game, the next Cyberpunk game, and how they felt about acquisitions and the rumors of acquisitions coming for their studio. And lastly, we're going to talk about the God of War trilogy. I know this has been out for a while now, but I did want to talk about that as well since I haven't discussed that yet. Now, quickly, before we jump into all of this, if you guys can do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and share the video to keep the community informed. Now, let's talk about this tweet from Zubitech, who did some digging and found that there's a lot of people leaving Deviation Games and going to work for PlayStation Studios. So first off, Fred Thompson, principal game designer now at PlayStation Studios, used to work at Deviation Games and now works at Sony. Obviously, we know about Jason Blundell. That's another guy that left. It was a co-founder of Deviation Games. We also have Adam Rosas now as an animation director over at Sony. We have Pat Dwyer, also now an executive producer, used to be at Activision as an executive producer, and before that, Treyarch as a director. And we also have JC Farmer, a junior game designer, and this was somebody we talked about before who had actually revealed to us that Jason Blundell is now with PlayStation Studios. So a lot of people are talking about this, and there's no concrete confirmation that they have formed a new studio, but it looks pretty promising that they have a deep project going on. That could be really with any one of these existing studios, but some people have thought to say that maybe Sony is working to build a whole new studio, but I do wonder about that because obviously they already have their main lineup of studios. They could obviously just create a team to make a project within that studio already. Like we know Naughty Dog has a couple projects on the go, Insomniac has a couple projects on the go. We know Santa Monica has 2 projects on the go. There's a lot of studios working on multiple entries, so they could be, doing the same thing just for another studio. I'm curious to see what they're working on. I'm curious to see which studio they're working with, if they are working with a studio. But regardless, this is interesting news. And it really is interesting because they had an agreement with Deviation to create a new game. And then that game was rumored to not have been going well. And then all of a sudden, we saw Jason Blundell, the co-founder, leave. And then now we're seeing other staff members leaving. It's becoming more and more evident that people are leaving Deviation and going to work for Sony, which again is perplexing because they were contracted anyway to create a game. So it's kind of weird that all of a sudden, and we know they put a lot of money in the studio because we saw the offices. The offices were very much plastered with PlayStation symbolism, right? So we know that there was something going on there. But what has happened since has me wondering, is this a departure from Deviation doing anything for Sony, and are they just working on something directly with these people and bringing them in-house? And there's no way to really know until the time comes where, they say, hey, we got a new game in production from so-and-so from previous, games. Like that's the only time we'll ever really know. And given that game development times are so long now for AAA games, like 5 years, man, 6 years, I don't even know. Are we even going to see their game this generation? Who knows? We'll see what happens unless they're working on an existing project, which would be a whole other story and definitely interesting. Now let's talk about CD Projekt Red. The Witcher 3, if anybody loves The Witcher 3, they know that Witcher 4 is going to be a huge deal. We obviously have CD Projekt Red working on the next Cyberpunk game, but we've got some official news here. The next entry in the Witcher series, currently known as Polaris, is going to see a development ramp up in 2024 with the expansion of the development team, according to the current CD Projekt Red CEO. In quotes, as of now, over 330 people are working on Polaris, and team will be expanded to about 400 people in mid-2024. Next year, CD Projekt Red will also start working on Orion, the Cyberpunk 2077 sequel, whose conceptual stage ended a while back. As of now, the development team is still being built, so obviously that'll come after The Witcher 4. But nonetheless, I love CD Projekt Red. Despite their big hiccup that they had, they've been really great. And then they go on to talk about acquisitions. Obviously, we heard about rumors of somebody acquiring CD Projekt Red. Well, they have this to say: CD Projekt Red is not interested in being acquired either by a large entity, as they have worked their entire lives to get to the position they are currently in, a position that will only improve in a few years. So they're like, hey, we've been working our lives to create this studio to create the work that we have and to the pedigree that we have, we're not looking to get acquired by anybody. We want to be independent, and I totally respect that. And I actually love that idea that they're going to push forward as an independent studio, because that's what we want, right? We want more companies to be independent. I don't like the idea of everybody consolidating. Mind you, when it happens, we do discuss it and we get deep in the weeds with that, but if it was up to me, all these studios would still be independent, and then, you know, the central big three platforms would have their own studios, which is a whole other thing. I prefer it that way, but obviously it's not about what I want. The industry is going in a certain direction. Now, lastly, let's talk about this God of War trilogy that's being reported, and it's supposed to be getting a PS5 remaster allegedly, and we're going to talk about this. I know this came out a while ago. This came out like December 25th, if I'm not mistaken, and I wanted to talk about it, but I wanted to wait until we had a little more. And this comes from Nick Baker. Obviously does an Xbox podcast, but okay, you know, there's a lot of these PlayStation rumors and stuff that come from them. It's quite interesting, but it is what it is. Anyway, he claims to have heard that the first 3 games in the God of War series will eventually land on the PS5, but he couldn't confirm whether they will be straight ports of the PS3 remaster or not. He doesn't believe God of War Ascension will be part of the package. Ascension released in 23 for the PS3 and was the last game to feature Terrence C. Carson as the voice of Kratos. Honestly, here's the thing, right? God of War, massive IP, massive success. Valhalla, massive success. Obviously, they're going to want to eventually refresh these games and bring them forward for people who didn't get to play them, or people who don't want to go back and don't want to stream them through the PlayStation Now service, right? So, or sorry, PlayStation Plus premium service. It's not a shocking revelation that this could happen. Do I think that there's any merit to this? Yeah, there could be. There could be. Am I confident in it? Absolutely not. I think that a lot of times these leakers and these guys, these rumor mongers, typically are talking about things that are either obvious or things that have been kind of hinted at, whether it be through legitimate leaks, whether it be through comments made by team members. That's what usually can happen with some of these things, especially from people who aren't like credible to that degree, right? When we talk about Tom Henderson, we know this guy has a deep connection, a very, very legitimate connection, because he's leaking hardware way before it even becomes official. We just look at the PlayStation Portal. He leaked that way before it was ever even known of, right? And people thought, well, this is crazy. Why would this product exist? And sure enough, he was right. PlayStation Edge controller, another one, right? So there's certain people we know are very legitimate and are very trustworthy in the sense of how official their sources are. And there are people who are hit or miss, like Nick Baker, no disrespect whatsoever, but just from my observation, this is what I see. So I think when it comes to this remaster trilogy of God of War, I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's not likely to happen. I just don't think that Nick Baker really has the goods here. I really don't. Now, if it was coming from Jeff Grubb, I'd be like, all right, you know, Jeff Grubb, legitimate record, pretty good. I'd be more inclined to believe that. But Nick Baker, not so much. But yeah, that's where I sit with this. But I could see this happening. I could see this happening, but not because Nick Baker said it. Because it just seems like a no-brainer type of deal, especially for an IP as big as it is, and especially with development times being as long as they are, it makes sense that in between they'd want to start releasing stuff so people can have something to play from these studios instead of waiting 4 or 5 years for a game. Because it's just, yeah, we can't have one game from a studio or 2 games from a studio every generation, especially as, you know, there's so much more competition in the industry and consolidation is real, right? But that's all I have for you guys in today's video. Please let me know what you think of all these topics. As always, if you liked the video, please hit that like button. If you did not like the video, hit the dislike button. Subscribe if you're new and share the video to keep the community informed. I thank you all for watching. Take care.